First of all, we'll welcome back Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Bjarni Benediktsson. We'll invite Minister for Digital Government and Gender from Denmark, Ms. Marie Bjerre. We'll have Luukas, who is the CIO, Undersecretary for Digital Transformation from Estonia. We'll have back with us on stage Clare, the federal CIO from the White House from the government of the US. And finally, we'll have Gatis, Ozols, Deputy State Secretary on Digital Transformation from Latvia. Please give them a warm applause as they come on stage.
So thank you for, again, an inspiring talk. I'm not sure I'm at a point in my life where I'm willing to sit in a self-driving car. My son is going through his driving and learning how to drive, so doesn't have his license yet, but he's driving me every day, and that's a little scary thing. Whilst everybody's getting ready and getting mic'd up, again, Anne-Marie, thank you. Could you, though, share with us in the room what does a tech ambassador do every day? What's the life of a tech ambassador?
She spends half her day on social media, trying to come up with, no. The majority of my time is spending time with governments and with tech companies. With tech companies, it's trying to represent the values, the opinions, the policies of the Danish government. With other governments, we're working with other tech diplomats to try and create new alliances, new partnerships, and then internationally engaging in Global Governance Forum. That's why I've just been in New York for the UN General Assembly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And now we have a full panel on stage. Thank you so much for joining me. How many of you, when I say sort of cool, sexy tech, think about governments?
What?
Come on, Iceland.is, at least you got to put your hand up. Okay. Well, after this panel, that's going to be changed. You're going to feel much more excited about it. So I'm going to dive right in, if you don't mind. Minister Bjerre, you have a very unique role. You are the minister for both digital government and equality and gender. Some find it odd. I find it incredibly visionary, very, I think, unprecedented, and something we should see more of. Could you share with us, what is your vision combining these two, very traditionally not aligned, but maybe very powerful areas together? And also, could you share a little bit about what do you see the opportunities for technology in this space? What would it take for us to help unleash them?
Well, I agree. It might seem like an odd combination, gender equality and digitalization. What has that to do with one another? But actually, it's very important, and more important than ever, that we put values into digitization. It doesn't matter. It matters how we digitize and what we use digitization for. Will we reproduce bias in our society? So actually, there are a lot of correlation between that, and I think as the Nordic countries, especially the issue about having values put into digitization is very important, and that's where we can stand together, because we share some of the same values: responsibility, data protection, gender equality, and that's actually what we have to stand together about and use our influence globally to address these issues, to have responsible digitization using our values. And in order to do so, we have to stand together. And also to be a strong showcase that we are actually good digital countries, that we come up with good practical digital solutions, also solutions that are cross-border. They talk together. We had a meeting earlier today where we discussed, could we be better to cooperate together using our digital infrastructure? Like, why is it that we can't pick up prescribed medicine in other countries, in our neighbor countries? We are so digital countries. We're top ranked. We should use that to be a practical showcase that we are very digital, and use that influence to get a responsible digitization, because it matters how we use digitization. And there are a lot of concerns there. for instance, algorithms on social platforms, on gaming, designed to get people addicted. In Denmark, we talk a lot about young kids getting addicted, feeling sick. It's hard to get off that telephone. Maybe all of us feel that once in a while. And that's putting the values into it. Like, what will we allow and what won't we allow? And that's where we should stand together.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Minister Benediktsson, this goes a little bit to this question around what's the sort of vision for technology. I mean, we heard very impressively from the CIO of Iceland Digital what's already happening. Could you help share with us what is maybe the sci-fi vision for Iceland Digital in 10 years from now? Is this friendly robots in the streets of Reykjavik? Or is it a dystopian place where kids are addicted to their phones and no one feels empowered in technology?
No, the core of the policy is just to make society better. And many of the things we do are reliant upon on the fact that we need to be more efficient tomorrow than we are today in all areas. What we've seen in Iceland in the last decade or so is that the private sector was leading. And we woke up one morning finding out that we had not given opportunities in the public sector the right attention. So it was truly an effort, what Andri was explaining, and the road that he has led that fantastic group over the last few years forward. It was an effort that was based on the vision that we could do better, we could show more efficiency. We were also focused on public services and enhancing the quality of public services. I am a strong believer that if you feel that public services are lagging behind, you see the technology is being used in the private sector, and the public sector is crap. It's burdensome. It doesn't function the way you would like it to do. What happens is trust is lost. And you don't experience that you are living in a society that is a cutting-edge society where opportunities are released. And what that ends up in is distrust in governmental agencies. And then, what is worst of all, distrust in politicians. That's the worst thing you can get. No, but really, we need to maintain trust between all of us living here by showing that we are doing our very best in all fronts. So it's not just about efficiency, it's also about quality of life, and the digitization, which of course is at core here, unleashes enormous opportunities, both for individuals and for the public sector. And I think we're just in the early stages of just realizing how much potential there is. And it is only when we digitize that the true possibilities of cross-border interactions will open. And that's when we really unleash the possibilities of going deeper in Nordic and Baltic cooperation, and then, for that matter, European, and just making life easier. And as a politician, you have to think, okay, so let's look at the young generation of Iceland. So what can we do today to make sure that when they grow up and they, educate themselves, this is an interesting place to live? Because today it's easy to move. You just moved from California to Denmark, and people do that all the time, move here and there. If we don't keep up with the pace and make use of all of the opportunities that are out there, this won't be a very interesting place to live in. It's also about that. So it's a multi-layered approach that we have in our minds, but at the moment we've been focusing on the public services, the number of services that we can have digitally to offer, but underlying is something which has to do with just quality of life and competitiveness of Iceland. That's really what is for me at the core.
Minister, next time I move, I'll move to Iceland.
Yeah,
Very
good.
convincing. If any of you find a travel guide to the most tech-optimistic country, it would probably go to Estonia. Luukas, I want to bring you in. We also hear this, trust is lost. Minister Bjerre talked about how the digital platforms not necessarily have been sort of taking the best care of our data, of our lives. There's a war in Europe. There's increased sort of cybersecurity risk. I'm a diplomat. I get paid to be concerned. But I can talk about all the bad things happening. How do you remain optimistic in the digitization journey of Estonia?
Yeah. Well, I guess we probably have the good luck to start off with the sort of path dependency of a good experience so far. So that's always a good starting point, right? But I want to get to the trust issue because that's really at the center of it. And the answer is, on a very simplistic level, very boring. It's transparency. But you then have to kind of start picking apart the stack of what transparency means. Transparency and openness can be very technical, right? Open data, the fact that you really have the data infrastructure so that the whole of society can keep you accountable, making your code open source. Transparency, however, is also behavioral. So, we are not infallible, and we've had our fair share of screw-ups and difficult moments, and we have that on the individual level, people's data being misused by government officials, on the collective level, security issues we've had, and so on. But one of the habits we picked up early on was being radically transparent about our screw-ups. So when a public official misuses personal data, someone who's authorized to do it, a policeman who's looking at, the driving record or the criminal record of their neighbor, which they shouldn't be looking at, and they are caught because we are monitoring that, then we make it public that they've done so. And they're disciplined, and sometimes they're fired. And when we have security issues that might impact the basic architectural security of what we're doing, we're very open. So some years ago, there was a fairly sort of low in the stack hardware vulnerability in the PKI chips used in our ID card. This was not specific to Estonia, but within 2 working days of having been notified of this vulnerability, we had the Prime Minister on television talking about the mitigation plan and what we do. And so what Estonians have learned with regards to what the government does, it's not that we're infallible and it's always going to turn right. It's that the algorithm of how we work, from the very technological to the very organizational, will iterate itself through it. So that speaks to the government part. As far as the private sector and the bigger world of services, I don't know that we are deeply optimistic in the sense that we believe that this will all turn out for the best. One of the most noted AI skeptics is one of the sort of the early the guys who started Skype, Jan Tallinn, and he's been very prominent in talking about the risks. I do think one belief we have is that the best way to deal with these risks is to have our hands dirty. And so we can't make abstract regulation, talk about principles in general. We actually need to be there. We need to be using AI in the public sector. We need to be working very actively with the companies developing it, because the only way we're going to mitigate the risks that are probably going to happen anyway, there's very little that Estonia on its own can do to slow it down. There's some things that Europe can do, but if you, like many people, are ultimately determinist about what technology wants, maybe we can slow things down and shape the course. We probably can't stop it fundamentally. Let's be ready for what's happening. So I think that kind of engaged realism is what keeps us optimistic.
Engaged realism. That's an excellent segue to Clare. I want to bring you in now. Is the U.S. strategy also engaged realism?
I think it's engaged realism and optimism. I think that we're really optimistic about what the future of technology is and the way that we can improve our society and people's lives. I think that's a core kind of American value, is optimism. But we are realistic, right? We talk a lot about cybersecurity, right? I provided you some data that if I was a CEO of a private company, I might not have my job when I was performing at the level that we're performing. And so we are realistic in the fact that we have to strive to improve. But we're also optimistic that we can do it, that we will do it, that we have the will, across our government to actually continue to drive forward, and that we have creative amazing people in our country that come from all over the world, right? We are the melting pot, and that we benefit from that creativity, and that has been driving some of the innovation that we've all had the wonderful opportunity to participate in. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked a lot about what we are, both learning but also, importing from Silicon Valley. I know you only spent 36 hours in Iceland so far, but maybe if you could, just a few of your sort of reflections and perspectives on what can the Nordic Baltic region offer the US and the world with regards to technology regulation and governance.
Right. I think you're leading in so many ways, right? And I think just embracing the fact that you're leading in so many ways, while we might seem large and intimidating, we also have a fractured, our states are very unique, right? Our federal government is one layer of us, but each state has a completely independent process, governance, population that has different values, thoughts, feelings. And so that is incredibly complex to weave together into the whole cloth of the federal environment. And so I think that we look towards countries that are going on these journeys, like all of you, with real admiration, and know that we have a lot to learn, right? We are constantly trying to listen, learn, and engage with you all, and I think that's why I'm sitting here, because I knew coming to Iceland, after having met the Icelandic team in London last year, that we could come here and see how what the environment was like, what all of you are like, that catalyzed the government to be so forward-leaning and so optimistic. So I think I am just incredibly impressed with the Nordic Baltic coalition, and sitting in the ministers meeting this morning. Just your collaborative partnership was just really inspiring, and so I think that's my answer. And the food's very good.
I mean, we'll always have that. But that goes out to the ministers. Gatis, I want to bring you in. From Latvia's perspective, what's the biggest opportunity when it comes to digitization of government that makes you really excited, that make you, you can't sleep at night because you're thinking about how to implement it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. For the government side, we currently see, I very like the presentation. The previous was shown this different levels of digital value chain. And I think that what we're facing now in Latvia, probably in other countries as well, that you start to think, okay, we need to move up the value chain of the digitalization for the government. And now we are very eager to go, okay, to say networks, okay, we need to do it, but it's job done. But then on the public services as well, there is much we would like to involve and develop in usability of services. But still, you see this potential of moving up the value chain when we speak about how to employ these emerging technologies, how to see how the technologies can benefit more, not only like technical things, but also to the welfare of the citizen, to the participation of citizens in democratic process. So we are looking now at that perspective. And other perspective, what we are looking on the government's role, how government could work and focus not only solely on how to make government transactions and experience with government more like nicer for citizen, but how a government could work as enabler for more broader changes in digitalization of society, how government could put in investments in the future of development of digitalization and digital society, like also planning and investing in securing the future. That we were discussing in the ministerial meetings that we are maybe not always ready for the future, what technology could bring for us. You mentioned that the quantum computing, artificial intelligence development. So we are working now in government also to work on those future needs, like investing in quantum networks and developing also the quantum. So here is the important part of this is also how we change the work of the government. So it's very important to have this multilateral approach, that we engage with universities, we engage with other countries, and we make this policy and those targets together. So this is the way how we are looking to change of the role and how we work. And also the perspective is more also on the upper level of the digital needs.
Great. Minister Bjerre, I want to come back to you. This question around digital inclusion. I know that you've been very focused on children in the digital revolution, the people who are not technical and who does not own a smartphone or computer. Could you talk a little bit about what you see what's the responsibility around digital inclusion? What are some of the ways to do it? What might be some of the collaboration formats around it?
Well, being such a digital countries also give us a huge responsibility in order to ensure that everyone can live in our society being digital, because we know that some people find it hard being a society that is very digital. And all of our countries are ranked in top being digitalized. So we have a big assignment in order to be more digital inclusive. In Denmark, that's something we've been focusing a lot on. In the spring, we adopted new legislation making it easier to be exempt from digitization. Not many Danish people are exempt for having digital post, but also we made a political agreement making it easier for people who want to be digital but find it difficult. So they don't want to be exempt from having digital post, digital services, they just need help. And what we did was to make it easier for families to help each other. Can you communicate with the public on behalf of your older mom? That was one thing. Also to use the NGOs, make them take responsibilities because they are in contact with a lot of these people. We have a huge responsibility in ensuring that everyone can live in our society being even more digital, because having public digital services is just one part of a society. The private sector is also getting more digital. So that is a huge responsibility, and I think we can use a lot of our examples in our countries to inspire each other.
Absolutely. Let me just see here. We obviously can't have this conversation without talking a little bit about AI. How many of you here are fundamentally more excited about AI than pessimistic? Most excited. Okay, good. And then who's a little bit more skeptic? Okay, good. How many of you trust that these guys are ready to regulate it, use it in a trustful way, really steer the AI revolution? Oh, come on, at least the people with the ministers, you can raise your hand. Okay. So there is excitement about this technology. I think also for most of us, it's still, what is AI actually? I would love to talk a little bit about how do we harness opportunity of artificial intelligence. I'm going to start with the ministers and then we'll go around. Maybe Benediktsson, if I go first, and then we'll go to Minister Bjerre. This question around trusting you, as representative for government, to set the right rules of the road. Could you share 2 thoughts on how you're thinking, what is the most important when it comes to artificial intelligence? You asked me the question earlier today, innovation versus regulation. Should we just unleash this and then maybe regulate a little bit later, or should we set the rules of the road right now?
I think it is a really tough issue. So when you start trying to find your way through that maze, I think you have to put at center that this technology has to work for the better of people, all right? You are doing this to make lives better. And once you kind of set that as a cornerstone, that's where you can start building rules and telling people what you're trying to block and what you're trying to get out of all of this. And I think, the first cases that we've heard from the media were those that some student was using AI to make life easier at school. All right, that was to be expected. But I think even though we've seen cases like that, I think we have to agree that the universities have to be a part of the start of this journey. And we have to ask scientific questions and moral questions, and all of those issues have to be involved when we start to build the framework for society, how to use technologies like these. So I think being optimistic means that we believe that we can get more out of this than it will do harm to us. And for sure, it doesn't take AI to find ways to do harm in this world. The old technology was enough to do a lot of harm. So let's be optimistic. Let's always keep in mind that we want to make sure that this works for enhancing living standards and quality of life. We're doing this for a better society, and let's kind of embrace it and not keep it out of the universities, but have them assist us in leading the way. And I think that that would be a good start. And last but not least, of course, cooperation across borders is crucial, so that we learn from examples of others, both good and bad things, and move forward.
Minister Bjerre, you're also Minister for AI and digital government AI. You're very engaged in the EU AI regulation too. Could you share what's the most important from your perspective when it comes to government in this?
I'm very happy that people are more optimistic than they are scared, because I think that's a cornerstone. We have to be more optimistic. And if we want to use our global voice to have responsible regulation on AI and on data protection, we need not to be scared of new technology. We have to embrace it. We have to find practical solutions. That's the only way we can have a strong voice to regulate, so we have responsible regulation. But I also understand why people are scared, whether we have the right and responsible regulation. That's something we're looking into, especially with the AI Act from EU. And I'm not necessarily sure we have the right regulation right now. It moves extremely fast, the development, and we have to continuously focusing on whether we have the right regulation. Just want to share one examination we did in Denmark. Last week, we published an examination where we had investigated 11,000 of the most used Danish web pages. 9 out of 10 of those web pages sent information to third parties like Google and Facebook before accepting cookies. I'm not sure we have the right regulation. And we have to focus on that, because otherwise we can't trust the digitization, though. So it's very important, and it's important that we as a Nordic Baltic region stand together.
Absolutely. Clare, you are also, home to the largest companies in this space. Some of them were in the Senate in Washington, D.C. Last week, meeting with the Judiciary Committee, one of the many committees that you have. I lost track of that part. Could you talk a little bit about the collaboration between the private sector and the U.S. government? There's the voluntary standards in AI that the most influential tech companies in this space. I know that you are more on the how to government use AI, but could you talk a little bit about that public-private partnership necessary that until we get the right regulation in place? This is not a Wild West, but there are expectations to these companies. How are you doing it? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so the first thing that the administration did was to write a AI Bill of Rights. That was the very first thing that we created because of our concern, right, being cautious, but also wanting to make sure that we are setting guardrails on privacy, security, equity, bias, all of those things that are absolutely critical to create the operating environment. Important to share that with the private sector, so that we were telling the private sector, these are our expectations. While we are not ready to regulate and write all of the policy yet, because the government needed to learn, digest, and also work with our colleagues in academia science, our national laboratories. We have a huge network of national labs that have the leading scientists in our country working on both quantum but also AI. So we wanted to get out fast and first to try and set that marker. Then we have continued to convene. That is one of the great powers of the White House, is the power to convene. You don't get an invitation to the White House that you don't accept. So we were able to bring companies in and hear from them what they are working on, how they are managing their organizations, what their security is like. So we tried to build that foundational knowledge, also knowing that we have to write guidance and we have to write these policy frameworks very quickly before people are fully understanding how AI is going to impact us, both on the mission side for our agencies, but also on the federal workforce side, right? One of the things that the large language models do is once you ask a question, right, and you write the right prompt to get the right response, if you upload data, it's then in the wild, right? That data, you can never pull it back. And so making sure that we're able to educate, get clear from our private sector colleagues, is that accurate, right? We heard all these things, we researched these things, but we wanted them to sit across the table and validate these things with us. And that is a very important part, I think, of diplomacy, certainly, but also of being able to work with these private sector partners. You know, are they being truthful? Do they feel like they are collaborative with us, or are they withholding because they want a competitive advantage against the other people that they're competing with? And so I think by bringing people together and convening, having that dialogue, getting them to sign on to a pledge to the president and frankly to the people of the United States that they will operate in an ethical, responsible manner was the most critical thing that the administration could do to start on this journey. But again, our policy frameworks will be coming in the next few weeks. We will have guidance out that we will put out for public comment. So again, we get the best thinking that isn't necessarily in government, but the best thinking from our entire ecosystem. And I think that in short order, we will be moving out on policy and regulation. And then we'll have to adapt to that human-centered policy making. Right, we're starting someplace, we're gonna plant a flag, and then that flag might wind up moving as we learn more about how the technology can be employed, but also the risks.
Absolutely.
Right?
Luukas, you know, one thing is to have a digital birth certificate. Another thing is to apply generative AI, these very powerful large language models across government. How's Estonia thinking about this?
Yeah. So I think in general, just before we get to the government-specific bit, what keeps me up at night is, will our tech sector and other sectors that currently have a competitive advantage in Estonia maintain that with the disruption that's coming from AI? And I don't think it's a given. You know, we've got a lot of software engineering firms that could be right in that spot where we're coding changes, and if they're not fast enough there, then there goes a lot of industrial capacity. And I think the AI Act on these things is going to help. I mean, it's doing all the right things. The question is it over-regulatory in some of the details in the application, just like the GDPR has all the right principles, but in application has been a mess. For government, you know, I'll talk about this a little bit. This is a shameless advertisement for the afternoon panel because we'll be talking about all these plans in greater length. But I think, very briefly, the challenge we have, and this is exactly what Minister Benediktsson was talking about, is how do we make our social welfare state sustainable for the next 50 to 100 years with the demographics we have, the environmental challenges, and all the unpredictability we have. And so it comes down to doing with the resources we have, or even with fewer resources, better outcomes. And to piggyback of what Mark Andreessen said, what AI fundamentally is cognition at a tap. It's changing the amount of human-like intelligence you have to make decisions and plan things. AI can make everything better. And so I think we're looking for ways in which AI can really make everything better in the services we deploy. There's a very practical problem we have with generative AI, which is it's super creative. And the way we do public services is very deterministic. And so how do we bring that creative bit into something other than just chatbots, where actually we're making decisions, we're allocating decisions. Some of that is an engineering challenge. I think some of that's changing how government does services and actually rewriting our law so that the outcome is what matters, and it's about promoting individual welfare, and maybe changing how we think about equal treatment and some of these other procedural safeguards. Not weakening them, I think strengthening them, but forming them, transforming them a little bit so they look different on paper.
Darn it, so it's not just a technical issue. We do actually got to do good old policy. We're going to close it soon. I want to give you each 45 seconds to answer the question, what really makes you hopeful about digitization of our societies, and how you're going to make that happen within the next 12 months. Gatis, we're going to start with you.
Okay. I think it's one of the it's a historical experience that we always have different challenges, and we always have standing before unknown and how it will impact. But we manage somehow to do through larger or smaller kind of management approaches. And regarding artificial intelligence, I think it is the same. And for government, from one side, we are thinking about how to use the artificial intelligence to make government more effective, to provide service more effective. But on the other hand, how to keep up with the society, up to the development of this artificial intelligence. On the one side, the government's role is to provide secure, trusted, also ethical AI. But regarding ethical, I think it's a question of social agreement between the players, between the civic society, between the government, between industry, what we agree, what is in our society the ethical thing. And I think it's important that the government would have this discussion, and through regulation probably this could be also kind of put on a paper. And from the other perspective, see how is our society ready to ensure that we have the necessary reskilling programs from the one perspective. From other, also to engage in societies, that you always have to have this critical thinking and evaluation of risk also from the side of the citizens.
That is a wonderful, I think, summary, and also a big agenda for the next 12 months. Minister Bjerre, what makes you hopeful, and how are you going to implement it over the next 12 months?
There's a lot of things that makes me hopeful. I'm very fascinated about digitization and all the new technologies and AI in specific. What I think is really fascinating is that AI can be used for things we haven't been able to solve before. Like, for instance, we use AI for breast scanning to find cancer, and AI is better to find cancer than the human eye. It's fascinating that we can use this technology in our welfare. And also, we can use it for creating better life, better communication. It makes our life easier. So I'm very, very hopeful. And I'm also hopeful that we will get the right regulation.
Absolutely. I was about to say amen, but this is not a trend. Luukas, what are you excited and hopeful about, and how are you going to make it happen?
I'm hopeful because of the smart people around me. First and foremost, of course, in Estonia and my team in our private sector, but also neighbors like these, because I kind of figure if we drop the ball, the good news is there's someone else who's probably carrying the ball right next to us, so we can take their positive example, pick it up, and keep going. And this kind of, you'll see this again, come to the afternoon. There's some positive kind of rivalry here, and who's doing more cool stuff, but that's really energizing and really good to keep us all going. So I'm hopeful because of my neighbors.
You really advertise this afternoon panel. Excellent. Minister Benediktsson, what makes you hopeful, and how are you going to implement?
Well, I sort of have the same thinking as was just described. When you have the right team and you have the commitment, where we started really was we brought a memo to government and said, okay, we've been thinking about this. Are we all in agreement? Let's do it. Next step, let's finance it. Next step, let's get Andri on board. And then we got the team together. So I just introduced the budget. It's financed. There is commitment. We got the right people. You have to be optimistic.
Incredible. And Clare, lastly, what makes you hopeful?
The creativity of human beings, right? We are incredibly complex, but we're also incredibly creative. And I get excited about that and seeing what we can achieve. I also am very optimistic about leadership. I think we are bringing these conversations, having thought leaders in policy and politics, really helping us focus these conversations gives me real optimism that we're going to be successful.
Thank you so much. I want you to join me in a big round of applause for this visionary, incredible group of leaders. And I believe next up is some coffee outside.
Thank you.